Welcome back to Drowsy Tales Daily. Tonight I have 24 fascinating stories from Reddit that will keep you engaged as you drift off to sleep. From workplace betrayals to friendship dramas, relationship boundaries, and family conflicts, these real-life situations will have you questioning what you would do in these scenarios. Get comfortable, close your eyes, and let's dive into tonight's collection of moral dilemmas. Our first story comes from a woman who worked at a marketing firm where she had been promised a promotion to senior account manager. She had been with the company for 3 years, consistently exceeding her targets and taking on additional responsibilities. Her manager repeatedly assured her that the promotion was just a matter of paperwork and timing. However, when the position was finally posted, she discovered that her coworker Jake, who had been hired just 8 months ago, had been given the role instead. What made it worse was that Jake had been asking her detailed questions about her client strategies and campaign ideas for weeks, claiming he wanted to learn from her expertise. She later found out that Jake had presented many of her ideas as his own during his interview for the promotion. When she confronted her manager, she was told that Jake had fresh perspectives and that she should be more of a team player. The woman was devastated, having turned down job offers from other companies because she believed her promotion was guaranteed. She decided to document all the instances where Jake had used her work and filed a formal complaint with HR, while simultaneously updating her resume and reaching out to those companies that had previously shown interest in hiring her. Our second story involves a man who discovered that his close friend of 5 years had been fabricating family emergencies to get out of paying for group activities and dinners. It started small. His friend would suddenly get urgent calls right when the check arrived at restaurants, claiming his grandmother was sick or his car had broken down. The group always covered his portion without question because they cared about him. However, during a casual conversation with the friend's sister at a party, the man learned that their grandmother had passed away years ago, and his friend didn't even own a car. When confronted, the friend became defensive, claiming he was going through financial difficulties and didn't know how else to handle it. The man felt betrayed because he had always been open about money troubles in the past, and their friend group was understanding about splitting costs differently when someone was struggling. What hurt most was that the friend had chosen deception over honesty, making the man question what else might have been fabricated in their friendship. Our third story comes from a bride who shared her nightmare experience with a wedding photographer who completely ruined her special day. She had booked this photographer 8 months in advance, paying a substantial deposit after seeing his impressive portfolio. However, on the wedding day, a completely different person showed up, claiming to be the photographer's assistant who would be handling the shoot. This person had minimal equipment, no backup cameras, and seemed unfamiliar with basic photography techniques. When the bride tried calling the original photographer, his phone went straight to voicemail. The assistant took poorly composed, blurry photos throughout the ceremony and reception, missing crucial moments like the first kiss and cake cutting. He left early without taking any family portraits or group shots that were specifically requested and paid for. When the bride finally received the photos 2 months later, most were unusable due to poor lighting and composition. The original photographer claimed he had been ill and that the assistant was fully qualified, but refused to offer a refund or reshoot. The bride had to hire a different photographer to recreate some shots with her wedding dress, but the authentic moments from her actual wedding day were lost forever. Our fourth story involves a college student who discovered that her roommate had been systematically sabotaging her social life and academic performance out of jealousy. It began with small things. The roommate would forget to give her messages from friends who called, or claim that study groups had been canceled when they actually hadn't. The situation escalated when the student noticed that her assignments kept disappearing from their shared printer, causing her to miss deadlines and receive lower grades. Her roommate would express sympathy while secretly deleting files from their shared computer and hiding textbooks. The turning point came when a mutual friend mentioned that the roommate had been telling people that the student was antisocial and didn't want to hang out anymore, which explained why her social invitation had suddenly stopped. When confronted with evidence, including screenshots of deleted files, the roommate broke down and admitted to feeling insecure about the student's academic success and popularity. She had been trying to level the playing field by creating obstacles. The student realized that her declining grades and social isolation weren't due to her own shortcomings, but deliberate sabotage. She immediately requested a room transfer and had to work twice as hard to rebuild both her GPA and her friendships that had been damaged by the roommate's lies. Our fifth story comes from a young professional who discovered that his cousin had been using his personal information to create fake social media profiles and dating accounts. The discovery happened when the man's girlfriend showed him a dating profile that used his photos and personal details, but with a different name and completely fabricated stories about his career and interests. Investigation revealed that his cousin had created multiple profiles across different platforms, some portraying him as a wealthy entrepreneur, others as a struggling artist looking for financial support. The cousin had been using these fake profiles to catfish people for money and emotional manipulation. Some victims had even sent cash to help with supposed medical emergencies or business investments. The man found out that his cousin had access to his photos through their grandmother's social media account, where family pictures were regularly posted. When confronted, the cousin claimed it was just harmless fun and that he wasn't really hurting anyone. However, the man discovered that several women had developed genuine feelings for the fake profiles and were devastated to learn they had been deceived. One woman had even traveled across the country to meet him, only to realize she had been catfished. The man had to contact each platform to report the fake accounts, file a police report for identity theft, and personally reach out to victims to explain the situation and apologize for his cousin's actions. Our sixth story involves a homeowner who found himself in an escalating dispute with his neighbor over a fence that was allegedly built 6 inches onto his property. The neighbor, who had recently moved in, immediately demanded that the fence be moved, despite the fact that it had been in place for over 15 years and was there when both properties were purchased. The homeowner offered to have the property professionally surveyed to determine the exact boundary lines, but the neighbor refused, claiming he had already done his own measurements. The situation escalated when the neighbor began filing noise complaints every time the homeowner's children played in their backyard, claiming the fence placement made the noise unbearable. He also started parking his car in a way that blocked the homeowner's driveway access, saying he was entitled to use that space since the fence was illegally placed. The homeowner eventually paid for an official property survey, which showed that the fence was actually entirely on his own property. When presented with this evidence, the neighbor accused the surveyor of being biased and demanded a second survey. The homeowner realized that this wasn't really about the fence at all, but about the neighbor's desire to control and intimidate. Our seventh story comes from a high school senior who discovered that her best friend had been lying about her family's financial situation to fraudulently obtain need-based scholarships and financial aid. The friend came from a wealthy family but had been portraying herself as coming from poverty to gain sympathy and financial assistance. She had coached the senior in how to write compelling essays about overcoming financial hardship, claiming she understood the struggle. However, during a casual conversation with the friend's mother at a school event, the senior learned that the family owned multiple properties and had recently purchased a luxury car. The friend had been using fake documents and false information to apply for aid meant for genuinely disadvantaged students. When confronted, the friend argued that her parents didn't support her education even though they paid for private tutoring, expensive test prep courses, and college application consultants. She claimed she deserved the aid because she worked hard for her grades, completely missing the point that the scholarships were specifically designed to help students who couldn't afford educational opportunities. The senior struggled with whether to report the fraud, knowing it would destroy their friendship, but also knowing that genuinely needy students were being deprived of aid they desperately needed. She ultimately decided to anonymously tip off the scholarship committee, providing evidence of the family's true financial status. Our eighth story involves an office worker who found herself systematically excluded from a workplace clique that controlled most of the office's social dynamics and professional opportunities. The clique consisted of 4 women who had been with the company for several years and seemed to coordinate their behavior to marginalize newer employees who didn't fit their specific criteria. They would plan team lunches and happy hours in private group chats, deliberately excluding certain coworkers while making sure everyone knew about the events they weren't invited to. The worker noticed that important work information was often shared during these social gatherings, putting excluded employees at a professional disadvantage. When she tried to organize her own inclusive team-building activities, the clique members would either skip them entirely or attend, but spend the time talking exclusively among themselves. The situation reached a breaking point when the worker discovered that the clique had been spreading rumors about her work ethic and competence to management. They had been documenting minor mistakes and presenting them as patterns of incompetence, while covering for each other's much more serious errors. The worker began documenting the exclusionary behavior and its impact on workplace productivity and morale. Our ninth story comes from a man who discovered that his brother had been secretly planning to force him out of their family business that they had built together over 10 years. The brothers had started their construction company with equal investment and had always operated as equal partners, sharing both profits and responsibilities. However, the man began noticing strange changes in their business operations. Clients he had never met, contracts he hadn't seen, and financial documents that were kept from him. When he asked questions, his brother would dismiss his concerns as paranoia or micromanaging. The truth came out when a longtime client accidentally mentioned a conversation about the upcoming ownership change that was supposed to happen. Our 10th story involves a woman who discovered that her sister had been faking a serious medical condition to gain attention and financial support from their family. For 6 months, the sister had been claiming to have a rare autoimmune disorder that required expensive treatments and frequent medical appointments. The family had rallied around her, providing emotional support, helping with bills, and organizing fundraisers to cover her medical expenses. The woman had even taken time off work to drive her sister to appointments and care for her during supposed treatment side effects. However, suspicion arose when the woman offered to accompany her sister to a specialist appointment and was told it had been canceled at the last minute. This happened several times, and when the woman called the doctor's office directly, she learned that her sister had never been a patient there. Further investigation revealed that all the medical documents had been fabricated, and the sister had been pocketing the money raised for her treatment to fund shopping sprees and vacations. When confronted with evidence, the sister claimed she had been depressed and that the attention and care from the family had made her feel better, so she didn't see the harm in continuing the charade. She showed no understanding of the emotional trauma she had caused by making everyone believe she was seriously ill, or the financial burden her lies had placed on family members who had sacrificed to help her. Our 11th story comes from a high school student who discovered that his wealthy classmates' parents had been bribing school officials to inflate grades and test scores to help their son get into prestigious universities. The student worked as a part-time assistant in the school's administrative office and noticed discrepancies in grade reports and transcript requests. The classmate, who was known for skipping classes and turning in subpar work, somehow had a perfect GPA on his official transcripts, despite teachers privately complaining about his performance. Investigation revealed that the parents had been making substantial donations to the school's building fund in exchange for grade modifications and favorable letters of recommendation. They had also hired someone to take standardized tests in their son's place, using fake identification and disability accommodations that were fraudulently obtained. The most disturbing discovery was that the parents had threatened to withdraw their funding for the school's new computer lab if their demands weren't met, essentially holding the entire student body's educational resources hostage. The students struggled with what to do, knowing that exposing the fraud would benefit other students who deserved those university spots, but also knowing it would destroy the classmates' future and potentially harm the school's funding. He ultimately decided to anonymously report the situation to the state education department and the universities involved. Our 12th story involves a woman who realized that her best friend had been systematically sabotaging her romantic relationships for over 2 years out of jealousy and possessiveness. The pattern became clear when she looked back at how each of her relationships had ended. Her friend would always find ways to create doubt and conflict between her and her partners. The friend would share concerns about the men she was dating, claiming to have witnessed flirting with other women or heard rumors about their character. She would also create situations where she needed urgent emotional support during important dates or relationship milestones, pulling the woman away at crucial moments. The turning point came when the woman's current boyfriend mentioned that her friend had been sending him inappropriate messages and trying to convince him that the woman was cheating on him with her ex. When confronted, the friend claimed she was just protecting her from getting hurt and that men couldn't be trusted. She revealed that she had been deliberately feeding information to previous boyfriends to make them jealous and insecure, believing that she was saving her friend from heartbreak. The woman realized that her friend's behavior stemmed from fear of abandonment and jealousy over sharing her attention with romantic partners. However, the damage was extensive. She had lost several potentially good relationships and developed trust issues that affected her ability to connect with people. Our 13th story comes from a man who discovered that his stepmother had been manipulating his elderly father to change his will and exclude his biological children from their inheritance. The manipulation had been subtle but persistent over several years, involving emotional blackmail and isolation tactics. The stepmother would create dramatic scenes whenever the father mentioned wanting to visit his adult children, claiming that they only cared about his money and didn't really love him. She had convinced him to move across the country, making visits difficult and expensive, then used the lack of frequent contact as evidence that his children didn't care about him. The man became suspicious when his father's personality seemed to change during phone calls, becoming cold and distant for no apparent reason. Investigation revealed that the stepmother had been intercepting letters and cards sent by the children, while telling the father that they never contacted him. She had also been fabricating stories about the children making derogatory comments about her and plotting to put him in a nursing home. The stepmother had convinced the father to sign a new will that left everything to her, claiming it was necessary to protect him from his greedy children. When the man finally managed to visit his father in person, he discovered that the elderly man was confused and believed lies that had been repeated to him constantly. The father was shocked to learn that his children had been trying to maintain contact and had never said the things he had been told they said. Our 14th story involves a graduate student who uncovered a sophisticated plagiarism ring operating within her department, where students were selling completed assignments and thesis chapters to other students. The discovery happened when she noticed that a classmate's research paper contained several paragraphs that were identical to work she'd submitted the previous semester. Further investigation revealed that a group of advanced students had been collecting and cataloging completed assignments from previous years, then selling them to current students who were struggling to keep up with the workload. The operation was particularly insidious because they would modify the papers just enough to avoid detection by standard plagiarism software, changing references and restructuring paragraphs while keeping the core content intact. The ring had been operating for several years and involved students across multiple departments with different pricing tiers based on the level of customization requested. Some students were paying hundreds of dollars for complete thesis chapters, while others bought smaller assignments for $50 to $100 each. The graduate student faced a difficult ethical dilemma because some of the students involved were her friends who were genuinely struggling with financial and academic pressures. However, she also recognized that the plagiarism was devaluing the degrees of all students and giving unfair advantages to those who could afford to buy their way through graduate school. Our 15th story comes from a young woman who discovered that her ex-boyfriend had been using multiple fake social media accounts to monitor and harass her for over a year after their breakup. The stalking was sophisticated and hard to detect. He had created accounts with different names and photos, some posing as women who wanted to be friends, others as potential romantic interests trying to gather information about her dating life. He had been taking screenshots of her posts, saving her photos, and tracking her location through social media check-ins and tagged photos. The woman only discovered the extent of the stalking when a mutual friend accidentally mentioned seeing her new boyfriend in photos that she had never shared publicly. Investigation revealed that the ex had been using information gathered from the fake accounts to show up at places where she was spending time, creating the appearance of coincidental encounters. He had also been contacting people she was dating through anonymous accounts, sharing embarrassing information and private photos in an attempt to sabotage her relationships. The most disturbing discovery was that he had been creating fake dating profiles using her photos and personal information, matching with men and arranging dates that she knew nothing about. Some of these men had become angry when she didn't show up, leading to confrontations and safety concerns. The woman had to change all her privacy settings, block dozens of suspicious accounts, and file restraining orders to stop the harassment. Our 16th story involves a restaurant server who discovered that his manager had been running an elaborate credit card scam that involved overcharging customers and pocketing the difference. The scam worked by adding small amounts to customer bills, usually between $5 and $15, that most people wouldn't notice when they were paying with credit cards. The manager would train new servers to enter slightly higher amounts into the payment system while showing customers the original receipt, claiming the difference was for processing fees or automatic gratuity. The extra money would be collected in cash at the end of each shift and split between the manager and participating servers. The server became suspicious when he noticed that his tips were unusually high compared to other restaurants where he had worked, and customers seemed confused about their final bill amounts. Investigation revealed that the manager had been running this scam for over 2 years, stealing thousands of dollars from unsuspecting customers. The operation was particularly effective because most customers paid with cards and didn't scrutinize their statements carefully enough to notice small discrepancies. The manager had convinced participating servers that this was a standard industry practice and that customers expected to pay these additional fees. When the server refused to participate, and threatened to report the scam, the manager tried to fire him for poor performance and attempted to blacklist him from other restaurants in the area. Our 17th story comes from a volunteer who discovered that the director of a local charity had been embezzling donations meant for homeless families and using the money for personal expenses. The volunteer had been helping with fundraising events and noticed discrepancies between the amounts collected and the amounts reported in the charity's financial statements. The director would announce large donation totals at public events, but the actual services provided to families seemed to be decreasing rather than expanding. Investigation revealed that the director had been creating fake invoices for services that were never provided, while redirecting donation money to pay for personal vacations, luxury purchases, and home renovations. The charity was supposed to provide emergency housing assistance, food vouchers, and job training programs, but many families were being turned away or receiving minimal help despite the organization's claims of having adequate funding. The director had been particularly cruel in her deception, often promising help to desperate families and then claiming that funding had been unexpectedly cut or redirected to other priorities. She would use these families' stories in grant applications and fundraising materials, exploiting their situations to generate sympathy and donations that she then stole. The volunteer faced the difficult decision of exposing the fraud, knowing it would likely result in the charity's closure and leave vulnerable families without any support services. However, she also realized that allowing the fraud to continue meant that donations would continue to be stolen while families remained in desperate need. Our 18th story involves a man who discovered that his business partner had been staging accidents and filing false insurance claims to generate extra income for their small construction company. The scheme involved deliberately causing minor injuries on job sites and then claiming that they were due to safety violations or equipment failures. The partner would coach workers to exaggerate their symptoms and seek unnecessary medical treatment to increase the settlement amounts. He had also been staging property damage incidents, such as backing trucks into buildings or dropping equipment, then filing claims for repair costs that were much higher than the actual damage. The man became suspicious when he noticed that their insurance premiums had skyrocketed and they were receiving more frequent safety inspections than other companies in their industry. Investigation revealed that the partner had been running this scheme for over 3 years, collecting hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent claims. The operation was sophisticated. The partner had relationships with specific doctors and repair contractors who would inflate their reports and invoices in exchange for kickbacks. He had also been careful to spread the incidents across multiple insurance companies and time periods to avoid detection. When confronted, the partner claimed that everyone in the construction industry engaged in similar practices and that insurance companies expected and budgeted for fraud. Our 19th story comes from a high school senior who discovered that her expensive college counselor had been recycling the same essay templates and recommendation letters for multiple students, while charging each family thousands of dollars for supposedly personalized services. The student became suspicious when she overheard another student reading an essay that sounded remarkably similar to her own, with only minor details changed. Further investigation revealed that the counselor had been using a database of successful essays from previous years, making small modifications and presenting them as original work. She had also been writing generic recommendation letters that praised students for achievements they had never accomplished, using vague language that could apply to anyone. The counselor's insider knowledge about college admissions was actually just information copied from free online resources and admissions websites. She had been charging families between $5,000 and $10,000 for services that consisted mainly of plagiarized content and false promises about guaranteed admission to top universities. The most disturbing discovery was that the counselor had been encouraging students to lie about their backgrounds and experiences in their applications, helping them fabricate volunteer work, leadership positions, and personal hardships that would make their essays more compelling. Several students had been accepted to colleges based on these false applications, putting them at risk of having their admissions revoked if the fraud was discovered. The student faced the difficult decision of exposing the counselor's practices, knowing it would affect not only her own college applications, but also those of her classmates who had unknowingly submitted plagiarized essays. Our 20th story involves a college student who discovered that her roommate had been subletting their shared apartment to short-term renters without permission, essentially running an illegal hotel operation while she was away on internships and family visits. The roommate had been advertising the student's private bedroom and common areas on vacation rental websites, hosting strangers in their home and pocketing all the rental income. The student only discovered the scheme when she returned early from a trip and found her bedroom occupied by tourists who had paid for a cozy student apartment experience. Investigation revealed that the roommate had been doing this for over a year, timing the rentals to coincide with the student's absences and carefully cleaning up any evidence before her return. She had been charging premium rates for the apartment's location near campus and downtown attractions, making thousands of dollars while putting both roommates at risk of eviction for lease violations. The operation was sophisticated. The roommate had installed a keypad lock system, created fake reviews using multiple accounts, and even hired a cleaning service to maintain the apartment between guests. She had been telling the student that her frequent absences were due to staying with her boyfriend, when she was actually staying in cheap motels while strangers occupied their home. Our 21st story comes from a gym member who discovered that her personal trainer had been selling fake nutrition supplements and exercise programs while claiming to have certifications and expertise that he didn't actually possess. The trainer had been marketing expensive supplement packages that he claimed were specially formulated for each client's needs, but investigation revealed that they were cheap generic vitamins purchased in bulk and repackaged with custom labels. He had also been selling personalized workout and nutrition plans for hundreds of dollars each when they were actually the same basic template with minor modifications. The member became suspicious when she experienced negative side effects from the supplements, and her doctor couldn't identify several of the listed ingredients. Further research revealed that the trainer's claimed certifications were from unaccredited online programs, and his supposed nutrition degree was from a diploma mill that had been shut down by state authorities. The trainer had been targeting vulnerable clients who were desperate to lose weight or improve their health, using high-pressure sales tactics and false promises of guaranteed results. He would create artificial urgency by claiming that his supplements were in limited supply or that his prices were going to increase, pressuring clients to make large purchases immediately. Investigation revealed that several clients had experienced health problems that could be linked to the fake supplements, including digestive issues, allergic reactions, and interactions with prescription medications. The trainer had no insurance or legitimate business license, meaning that clients who were harmed had little recourse for medical expenses or damages. Our 23rd story comes from a woman who discovered that she'd been dating a man who was part of an organized catfishing network that targeted single women for financial and emotional manipulation. The relationship had lasted 6 months and seemed genuine. They video chatted regularly, he sent flowers and gifts, and he appeared to be a successful businessman who traveled frequently for work. However, inconsistencies in his stories and behavior began to raise red flags. Investigation revealed that he was actually a team of people operating multiple fake identities, using stolen photos and carefully crafted personas to manipulate victims. The network would target women on dating sites who appeared to be financially stable and emotionally vulnerable, building elaborate romantic relationships designed to extract money and personal information. They had sophisticated systems for maintaining consistent stories across different team members, detailed profiles of each victim's preferences and vulnerabilities, and scripts for handling common questions and situations. The woman realized that her boyfriend knew intimate details about her life, not because he cared about her, but because everything she shared was being documented and analyzed to make the manipulation more effective. The network had convinced her to invest in fake business opportunities, lend money for fabricated emergencies, and share personal financial information that could be used for identity theft. When she finally demanded to meet in person, the team began preparing to disappear, but she managed to gather enough evidence to trace their operation. Investigation revealed that they had been targeting dozens of women simultaneously, stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars while causing severe emotional trauma to their victims. Our final story involves a college admissions officer who discovered that a local tutoring center had been operating an essay mill that sold custom scholarship and admissions essays to high school students. The officer became suspicious when she noticed similar writing styles and themes across multiple applications from the same geographic area, despite the essays supposedly representing different students' unique experiences and perspectives. Investigation revealed that the tutoring center was charging students thousands of dollars to have professional writers create their college application materials, including personal statements, scholarship essays, and supplemental application responses. The operation was sophisticated. They would interview students to gather basic information about their backgrounds, then have experienced writers craft compelling narratives that dramatically exaggerated or completely fabricated achievements, hardships, and personal growth experiences. The center marketed itself as providing admissions consulting and essay coaching, but investigation revealed that students were receiving completed essays with minimal input or revision. They had been particularly successful at creating tear-jerking personal statements about overcoming adversity, often fabricating stories about family poverty, medical challenges, or personal trauma that would generate sympathy from admissions committees. The center had also been coaching students on how to maintain consistency in interviews and follow-up communications, essentially helping them lie convincingly about experiences they had never had. When confronted with evidence, the center's director claimed that all students were simply receiving guidance and that the final essays reflected their own thoughts and experiences. That concludes tonight's collection of 24 stories, from workplace betrayals and friendship manipulations to complex fraud schemes that affected entire communities. These situations remind us how important it is to stay vigilant and trust our instincts when something doesn't feel right. Sweet dreams, and I'll see you tomorrow night with more fascinating tales from Reddit.